Thanks for the lacquer seafood braais, and of course the finest whiskies. But what about my multi-million rand investments? This is the burning question many of the former clients of Johannesburg investment broker Mark Kretschmer are left with today, yet the man himself is nowhere to be found.
For some of the clients, this was pretty much the entirety of their investment. So they had trusted Mark to the extent that they'd invested everything with him. And now they really don't know what they can get back or even if they will get anything back. I even spoke to a father who'd invested his daughter's education fund with him.
Sure.
And he hasn't yet told his daughter, who is overseas, he hasn't broken the news to her.
This conversation with News 24 business journalist Jan Cronje next. Later in the show, Helen Zille mouths possibly standing for Johannesburg mayor next year. And finally, a runner who had gone missing shortly after competing in the Comrades is found and receiving treatment in hospital.
To stay tuned to The Lead for every edition, hit the follow and subscribe buttons on our Spotify, Apple, and YouTube podcast channels.
This is the 50th edition of The Lead. Thank you, Danki, Nkosi, and Ngiyabonga Kielaboa for listening to us thus far. We appreciate all the support. You can now send a short voice note of 15 to 20 seconds with your questions or thoughts on this episode to our official The Lead WhatsApp line. That number is 072 562 3179. I'll repeat it, 072 562 3179. Of course, you can mail us to thelead@24.com. Well, my name's Graham Robenheimer. Welcome to the week. Let's chat all this and more right here on The Lead on News 24. Well, a smooth talker who plied them with fantastic food and drink, convincing many into handing over their precious millions, but only to evade their questions when it eventually came time to cough up. This is how numerous clients currently describe the elusive Johannesburg investment broker Mark Kretschmer. However, the word is now finally out. Several cases and complaints have now been brought against him. The only issue is neither his clients nor News 24 know exactly where Mark is today. But to chat further, we're joined now in studio by News 24 business journalist Jan Cronje. Thank you, Jan. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. Welcome to your debut edition of The Lead.
Thanks, Graham.
So who is this guy? What company does he represent? And as an investment broker, for somebody who perhaps doesn't know, Jan, you would know it a lot more closely. What are they meant to be doing?
Well, Mark is a 56-year-old investment broker from Johannesburg. He's had a company called PCS Holdings for about the last decade. Now, Graham, this is a boutique investment firm. And what he does is he invests on behalf of clients, which in his case are usually friends, people that he knows in his social circle. And his selling point is that he told them he'd be able to get better returns than going to one of the large investment houses.
How much money are we talking about here? Like, what are the amounts? Are we talking a couple of $1,000, or are these people's precious savings and retirement annuities that they hand over? What are we talking about here?
My colleague and me, Ivan Pius, spoke to 6 of his clients, and these 6 alone invested just over 30 million with him. Now, these are 6 from a much larger number, so that total is certainly going to increase, Graham, but we don't have an exact amount yet.
And what is he offering here? Big sporadic payments over time?
Well, what he was offering seems to be quite a standard investment portfolio. He'd tell them that he'd be able to get slightly better returns, or in some cases much better returns than what the big banks or investment houses were offering. He wasn't offering crazy returns. He wasn't offering the types of numbers that we see, for example, online on fraud sites or things like crypto scams, right? He was offering returns that very well could be true.
Some of his victims, as you and your colleague Ivan were sort of detailing in your latest piece, which to our News 24 subscribers reads the following: broker vanishes with over 30 million rand of single parents, friends, relatives' money, penned by, of course, Jan and Ivan. They talk of lavish braais, seafood braais. He's bringing out the expensive whiskey, putting on all the bells and whistles to ensure that he gets more clients, that he wins them over. Essentially, they all sort of were hoodwinked by this better life that he was offering, right?
Yes, he certainly presented himself as someone that was very successful. And from the clients that we spoke to, Graham, these are people that actually knew him mostly for a couple of years, people in his social circle. So they thought that this investment manager was someone they could trust. Their children would go to the same school, or they would go hunting together or things like that, right? So they knew him. He wasn't an unknown someone on the internet trying to flog them something. He was someone that they were in contact with. And many of them told my colleague Ivan that he would host lavish braais, there would be seafood, crayfish, he'd have fine whiskies. He went hunting with some of the other clients. So he certainly presented himself as a man who was successful, and if you invested your money with him, he could give you a return that was better than what you could get in, one of the investment houses.
Jan, give us a little bit more of an idea of the pain some of these families have gone through. It's all sort of gone up to 30 million rand in news headlines these days. We often hear about corruption involving much more, but to, ordinary South Africans, if you will, 30 million rand in that case of the woman, 20 million rand, it's a hell of a lot of money. Explain some of the pain and the emotions that these people have been going through.
Graham, the clients that Ivan spoke to are very emotional. The numbers themselves don't tell the whole story. It's what they had planned to use that money for that's important. So for some of the clients, this was pretty much the entirety of their investment. So they had trusted Mark to the extent that they'd invested everything with him. And now they really don't know what they can get back, or even if they will get anything back. Ivan spoke to a father who'd invested his daughter's education fund with him. Sure. And he hasn't yet told his daughter, who is overseas, he hasn't broken the news to her. We spoke to a widow who invested 20 million rand with him. Now, this was the entirety of what she had and was expecting to live on. There was a sad story of a family friend who has a disabled child, and they said that they told Mark that this money that they were putting in for the investment would go towards helping to care for this disabled child. That money is also gone. So this money, for many of the clients, it wasn't something that they could lose. It wasn't a speculative bet. This was money that they needed for very specific, important reasons.
Okay, so what I understood from your piece is that at least at this point, there are two separate SAPS investigations. Before we get to the professional body that overlooks this entire network, at least we know for now that the police are apparently investigating, right?
That is correct. Of the 6 clients that we spoke to, 2 of them have lodged separate police cases. Now, Graham, as you know, what will likely happen is that in time, those 2 cases will be merged into one. We know that one of those cases is being investigated. We haven't heard back from the police in the other case, but the long and short of it is there's an ongoing police investigation.
And do we know what the particular charges or that we're speaking to? Is it fraud, theft, anything along those lines?
Right. So the charges that the clients have accused him of include fraud. That's the umbrella term, you could say. Other things are financial misrepresentation and then breaking a host of quite specific financial sector laws. But fraud is the overarching one.
Jan, so I know that in this piece you particularly focused on interviewing the representatives from the Financial Sector Conduct Authority. This is the body responsible for overseeing the sector, regulating, making sure people like this don't get away with, actions like these. What are they saying at this stage? And have they been able to confirm if Mark is still operating at this point?
Yes, so they say that they have received at least 3 complaints against him. Now, they can generally only investigate if they've received a complaint from the member of the public. So they are on the very first stage of their investigation, which is a preliminary investigation, to see if there's enough evidence that a full investigation is warranted. So it's early days there. If they find, and we suspect that this will happen, that there is enough information for a full investigation, they will then announce and launch a full investigation. They also gave us information on whether he still has a license to operate as a financial services provider, and they said that he doesn't. That license was revoked, or rather the company that he had his license via pulled it on the 27th of January this year.
Which is PCS, right?
Yeah, well, his company, Graham, that was called PCS Holdings. He was the sole director of it. He actually had his license via another company called Freedom Capital. He was a representative of them. Now, Freedom Capital, of course, we spoke to them to hear what they had to say. And they said that they denied absolutely having anything to do with the alleged fraud and financial misrepresentation. Then they also said that they were not aware that Mark was using their financial services provider license in the way that he was. And as soon as they became aware of it, they revoked it, and they lodged a complaint against him to have him debarred as a director of a company. I'm not sure where that complaint is at the moment. It's probably still early days there too. But
so he was using this other company's number, basically.
Yes, which you can do in certain circumstances. What what seems to be the case here is that Freedom Capital wasn't aware, or what they told us is they weren't aware he was using it in the way that he was. Not that they weren't aware that he was using it at all. And as soon as they became aware of these complaints against him by members of the public, they quickly pulled that mandate that he could no longer be a representative of their company.
So now what happened when you got hold of Mark? You did get hold of him, right?
We tried to get hold of him. So let me just sketch a little bit what we did, because this is, of course, very important. The number that he'd been using to communicate with his clients, the cell phone number, is not operational anymore. Neither are the 2 emails for his company. We called around, and eventually I spoke to his father. Now, his father told me late last week that Mark is unable to comment. So that is the only comment that we have of him so far. And Graham, we don't specifically know where he is either. And this is not something that we are trying to find him. The clients are also trying to find him, because they want to serve, various papers on him in a bid to try and get back their money.
And of course the police, and of course that regulatory authority body that we spoke about prior. I mean, in your piece, one of them is a woman who's lost up to 20 million rand left by her late husband. The quote that you're running is that my children, according to her, didn't know anything about this particular investment. I didn't tell anybody. She said she would make sort of deposits and then withdrawals. There weren't really issues for a lot of time. And then suddenly you would complain about, oh, Mark has poor cell phone reception, or he's undergoing some sort of surgery. He can't talk any longer. And so she got it back in dribs and drabs, but then sort of the tap stopped flowing after a certain point in time. What's her particular legal recourse here? I mean, somebody listening to this right now will be like, what's the SAPS going to do here? Really? And somebody else might think, oh, yeah, an oversight body, their powers may be severely limited here. What is, in your sort of learned experience dealing with cases like this before, Jan, what's her legal recourse?
Graham, it's often very difficult, and it often takes a very long time to get money back. Now we must say that in this case, Mark is only facing allegations. He hasn't been found guilty of anything yet, right? But in cases like these, police investigations take long because they're complex, and the police often don't have the financial accountants that they need to trace, complex money trails. The FSCA, the regulator, does do investigations. Their powers are constrained to an extent that they can, for example, disbar someone, they can fine someone, and they have been fining financial advisors found guilty of wrongdoing many millions of rands, but they are not really the body that is going to recoup the money for you. Now, what sometimes happens in these cases is that as soon as the clients become aware that something's wrong, they rush to court and try and get a liquidation order against the company and get provisional liquidators appointed. Those provisional liquidators take over the management of the company, and they are then able to trace the funds, freeze the funds, hold those funds. If the company is placed into final liquidation, they then work out which creditors are owned what. In this case, it doesn't look like the clients have taken that route. I know that some of them have written legal letters to PCS Holdings, including Freedom Capital, a kind of, that'll be the first part of a possible legal ploy to try and recoup the money from this company that he was in some way affiliated with, although it says it knew absolutely nothing about what was going on. But it's often very difficult to get this money back.
And PCS, he didn't have any other sort of joint directors that he was on some sort of company board with or anything like that? You haven't managed to get through to any representative other than, obviously, Mark, who's been elusive, right?
That's it. He was the sole director. He was the founder. As far as we can see, he was the sole member. It was a small boutique investment agency, and it looked like it was his personal network of friends, his personal charm. He was, by all accounts, quite a charming man that he used to attract these investments.
Yeah, according to your piece, a Kretschmar family friend said she had invested around 2 million rand. This is of the 6 people that you yourself and Ivan interviewed. Invested 2 million rand with Mark in 2020. And then he apparently, according to them, quote unquote at the time, appeared to be a very successful and caring man. This was somebody that was able to, of course, turn on the charms, right? He's also been known to go missing in the past. Your investigations even went to the Pink Ladies, the missing persons organization that does very critical volunteer work in trying to find lost family and friends, right?
That is right. Earlier this year, I think it was in February, so the month after Freedom Capital had kind of revoked his mandate to act as a financial advisor, the Pink Ladies put out a missing alert for him. There's also a police statement around that time. He was later found and returned, so to say, to Johannesburg. So we're not sure exactly what happened during that period, but it does add to the mystery of what was going on.
Okay, so there could be various avenues that the victims here, as we're now understanding them to be, could finally, get their money back. How long does that sort of process normally take in your knowledge of similar cases like this in the past, Jan?
In cases of liquidations, and again, we're not aware of a bid to put this company into liquidation, but I think it's quite likely that something like this may happen. It can take years for the money to go back to the creditors.
100%. It's like not as obviously complex, but I didn't know if that wrapping up somebody's somebody's will and testament can be such a long and arduous process, right? Their estate, wrapping up the estate, it's such a long-winded thing that can take several years, depending on how many assets, how much money we're talking about here at the end of the day. So who knows in this particular case? In your experience, I think perhaps to end off, reporting on similar cases like these in the past, from my mind's eye, it seems like we're hearing more and more about these sort of alleged fly-by-night cases, right? Where somebody's offering, healthy rewards, perhaps not massive, but guaranteed over time. Plying you with food and drink. Okay, that's extra spice for the story, but it feels like these things happen an awful lot these days.
I was interested in this case because, in a way, it's an old school fraud. Now, that if it does turn out to be fraud, again, we have to be a little bit wary here that these are still allegations, but it's not an online scam where many of scams have actually moved online. It's someone using his personal network to attract investments. And you're right, there have been a number of such cases. Last year and the year before, there was a very high-profile case of also a Johannesburg investment manager called Craig Warrener. He also seemed to leverage his old school ties. I can't remember what school he was linked to attract millions of investments in a company called the BHI Trust. He pled guilty, he took a plea deal and was sentenced to 25 years in jail. So this kind of old school in-person fraud and financial mismanagement exists alongside the online fraud that we are seeing more and more of. And it's just interesting that we have to now be careful about both of them at the same time.
Sure. Any potential follow-ups to this story? I mean, you still haven't gotten any word from Mark himself, so I'm imagining that you and Ivan are not going to let this one go anytime soon, right?
Absolutely. We will be waiting to see what the FSCA says. We'll be waiting to see what the police say. We'll be waiting to see if the clients succeed in their legal demands that PCS or Freedom Capital return the money. We'll be waiting to see if there's any kind of liquidation, and we'll be trying to get hold of Mark and any other clients who interacted with him. So we're going to stay on this.
Jan, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. A lot more to come, I think, in this particular story. Understanding perhaps what lifestyle Mark has led for the longest time might give us a bit of a better indication of where the money went. Of course, as you've said throughout this, a lot of this has been allegations at this stage. The investigations do need to run their course. And of course, we would love it for Mark to be giving his say on this particular show. So if you're listening to The Lead at this time, or you perhaps have seen Ivan and Jan's reporting on the front page of News 24, here's your opportunity, right, Jan?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time. Jan Krenier, News 24 business journalist. I really do appreciate it, and I hope to have you on The Lead again soon. To our trending topic now, she helps steer the mother city for the Democratic Alliance. And now Helen Zille, the party's former leader and Western Cape Premier, is mulling the idea of formally putting her hand up to run for mayor of Johannesburg next year. The metro's motored through numerous mayors in recent years. The city is currently suffering from years of neglect and urban decay. Zille has since confirmed that she's been approached from within the DA to possibly run. However, she says she'll first have to consult with her family before making any hasty decisions. The DA got 26.1% of the votes in the Johannesburg Metro in the previous municipal elections. That's not that far behind the ANC's 33.6%. Zille says she loves the City of Gold and there's potential for the DA to take over. The current DA Federal Council chair says it's a big challenge, no doubt, but quote-unquote, I'd do anything to save the city to which I owe my youth. In the meantime, she's revealed her party has struggled to keep the interest of some potential mayoral candidates because the pay that comes with the job is not necessarily up to their standards. That's why Zille's name has since come up. And finally, some good news. A runner from Cape Town who had gone missing shortly after competing in the Comrades marathon has now been found and is currently receiving treatment in hospital. Now, it's understood construction workers found Moira Harding lying outside on her back near the NSRI base by the point in Durban earlier on Monday morning. She was said to be in a hypothermic state some 15 hours after competing in the race. The local NSRI base head immediately recognized Harding from all the circulating social media posts about her disappearance. The base itself is about 7 kilometers away from the finishing line of the Comrades at People's Park. NSRI officials believe Harding had been exposed to the elements all night long. A helicopter was shortly called in to airlift her to Mhlanga Netcare Hospital. We'll keep you posted on her recovery. In the meantime, this report is thanks to News 24's Sakaseni Nxumalo. From questions over missing R1 million investments to a missing Comrades runner found in Durban. Thank you so much for listening to our 50th edition of The Lead on all of your favorite streaming platforms. In response to our previous episode where we asked the question, has the NPA messed up again? Karen Morn on why Ace Makhushule's PA had walked free in the so-called asbestos scam tender trial that's currently postponed for some 6 months in the Free State High Court in Bloemfontein. Of course, our colleagues Bernadette Wicks as well as Karen Morn have been keeping a close legal eye on proceedings there. We of course now know that the PA, Morwadi Cholota, is the former assistant to then Free State Premier Ace Makhashule. She won her special plea against the NPA. She thus got her extradition from the United States handled by the NPA deemed unlawful. It came after a Supreme Court of Appeal had previously ruled that only the Justice Minister may request extraditions and not the NPA, and that the NPA should have been fully aware of this precedence before it went ahead with the Cholota matter. And a lot of people scratching their heads in response to this and why the NPA is potentially given an own goal here. We've been getting a lot of your comments. If we have a look at the comments section from the previous episode, It's True Exe writes, another own goal. The NPA is no match for the hotshot advocates who seem to turn up at all these high-profile cases. User 433840 writes, sadly, unbelievably incompetent to the point of being deliberate. That person asks. The NPA is despicable, writes Mamokhaleke. They just don't know what they're doing. When they find out they don't have a case in the matter, they solicit a bribe instead of just either withdrawing the matter or closing the matter. That's that view by that particular person. And then oldest trick in the book, writes user 693673, be perceived to do the right thing by prosecuting, making a seemingly innocuous administrative legal error, and the case gets dismissed on a technicality. MI6 also writes, the NPA is not fit for purpose, unfortunately. We also got a voice note from a lead listener. Thank you so much. Let's have a listen.
I'm so frustrated because I don't understand how NPA acted unlawful, because the two countries possibly communicated the extradition, and South Africa never entered USA on their own. I really do not understand why the extradition was unlawful. And if that is the case, the same wife of Bester, who was also extradited, the extradition must also be unlawful, because this is now a case law now.
Keep those voice notes coming in future. The official lead WhatsApp line to News 24 is 072-562-3179, 072-562-3179. Of course, you can also hit the follow and subscribe buttons on our Spotify, Apple, and YouTube podcast channels to be notified of the next edition. We're running like clockwork this week, Monday to Thursday at 7 p.m. in the evenings. Thank you again for listening to our 50th edition of The Lead. It's an absolute pleasure to put this show together for you every single day as both producer and presenter of The Lead. And of course, we have a big team behind us making sure that everything that goes out is credible, fact-checked, and that we do our utmost to ensure that the audio quality is very good, and that you're getting a varied experience, that you're being brought up to speed with what's happening in the news cycle, that you don't miss a beat, and that importantly, hopefully you are also reading further in terms of our coverage on the front page of News 24. Really appreciate it. Yes, to the next 50. My name's Graham Robillano, and so long as there's news, we'll have the lead on News 24.